Hey guys, today I'm going to be updating my prediction for the 2022 Senate elections, which are just 6 months away. So this is my prediction for the end of the month of April. And in this month, we have had many important polls come out in which I've talked about previously. However, things have not changed too much on the national level in terms of the approval rating of both Joe Biden, which currently sits at around negative 12%, as negative 11 to negative 12%, and the generic congressional ballot, in which Republicans have been leading by around 2 to 3% over the last couple of months, essentially since this year has started. So the Republican Party will be going into 2022 at an advantage. They are currently leading in generic congressional ballot polling. The last time that they were in the lead before they were able to take it last year was all the way back in 2016 with the election of Donald Trump in both a Republican House and Senate. However, looking at the approval numbers for Joe Biden, things do not get any better for the Democratic Party, as Joe Biden has consistently been at around that 42% mark over the last couple of months. His approval has really not changed too much, and his approval rating is very similar to what we saw for Donald Trump, although at this point, Biden is yet to be more unpopular than Donald Trump at any point in his presidency, according to these poll averages. So the Democratic Party right now is definitely going into the midterms at a disadvantage. They do control the House, the Senate, and the presidency, which is why everything, all the problems in the country currently are being blamed on the Democratic Party. So looking at this map here, I'm going to start off by filling in the solid states for both the Democrats and the Republicans. Both parties are going to have many seats in which their incumbents are going to win by very wide margins. So I'm going to start off with the Republicans here, and in the state of Oklahoma, you will see that there is a special election now. This is because of the announcement of the early retirement of Jim Inhofe, who just won his re-election in 2020, and after the 2022 term in early 2023, at the very beginning of the month of January, the Republican Party is going to lose one senator, as Jim Inhofe will be officially retiring, which is why there is a special election to fill this seat, who will, and the winner of this race will serve 4 years until 2026. And so that does not really change too much. Oklahoma is one of the reddest states in the country, and if you look at the presidential elections in this state, Republicans typically win almost every single county in the state. So Democrats really have no chance at either of these two seats open in Oklahoma. Even though one of them will be an open race, there's no doubt that the Republican Party is going to come out on top. For the Democrats, they of course have their very traditionally solid Democratic states, all the states on the West Coast, including the state of Hawaii, as well as many of these in the Northeast. In the state of Vermont, Patrick Leahy, the president pro tempore and longest serving Democrat in the Senate currently, will be retiring. However, he will basically be replaced at this point by Peter Welch, who is the representative of the Seoul Congressional District of Vermont, and he has a very, very high chance at winning this race. If you looked at the polls released between the two, the latest one shows Peter Welch up 35 points. That is not surprising at all. It almost matches Joe Biden's presidential margin in 2020 in the state of Vermont. And finally, I have the state of Illinois, and for the Republicans, I also have the state of Kansas. So this will give the Democrats 45 seats and the Republicans 43, with these solid states filled in. These incumbents are very likely to win their re-elections. These are all very traditionally Democratic or very Republican states. And in the case of Iowa here, Chuck Grassley is running for re-election, which is why I'm putting this as solid. He has been holding this seat since the early 80s, and I don't think he's going to win re-election by any margin less than 15%, which is a threshold needed for a state to be solid. And so now I'm going to move on and take a look at the likely states on this map. These are states in which the candidates of either party are going to win by margins of between 5 to 15%. And I do not have any likely Democratic states on this map. However, I do have a few Republican ones that I do want to go over. So starting off with the state of Missouri, there's going to be a very interesting race in this state, as the primary for the Republican nomination has been very interesting, to say the least. least. And looking at the 2016 results between Roy Blunt and Jason Kander, this was a very close re-election for Roy Blunt. Blunt will not be running for a third term in 2022. He will be retiring. That is why we're seeing a primary on both the Democratic and Republican sides. However, Jason Kander was a very good candidate, but due to mental health issues, he will not be running in 2022. So on the Republican side for this race in Missouri, Eric Greene is the former governor, and Vicky Hartzler are the two frontrunners for this race currently. Eric Schmidt also has a very good chance. So Hartzler is currently the new frontrunner for this race, as there's been more stuff that have come out about Eric Greene's and his relationship with his ex-wife. So that definitely tanked him in the polls very recently, as that came out earlier last month. And since then, Hartzler and Schmidt have been the two that have been leading in the latest polls. So this primary is very open. Donald Trump is yet to make an endorsement. He never endorsed Eric Greene's, but I do not think he is going to anymore. It's going to be Schmidt or Hartzler. My bet currently is on Hartzler. She does also have a high chance at getting that nomination, which is going to be very important and a very important determining factor in who wins the GOP primary in this race. And since the Republican Party is widely expected to win this race, this nomination is going to be very important. On the Democratic side, currently Lucas Kunce is the frontrunner, and he is basically going to win this nomination at this point. Every other big candidate has essentially dropped out. There is Trudy Valentine. However, I do not think that she really has the support to defeat Lucas Kunce in the primary later next month. So looking at the latest polls in the state of Missouri, you will see that most of the polls do show the Republicans with a pretty significant lead. Hartzler plus 20 against Scott Sifton, who has dropped out. So if you look at the polls with Lucas Kunce here, you will see that Hartzler led by 18, Schmidt led by 15. Eric Greene's has by far been the worst candidate, leading by just 1 point in the latest poll against Lucas Kunce. And so that is why I think that as long as Eric Greene's is not nominated, the state of Missouri is going to be relatively likely for the Republican Party. The margin is not going to be too small as long as Eric Greene's is not nominated. Missouri has previously elected 2 Republicans to the Senate, and I don't think that really is going to change anytime soon in 2022. Now, looking at the state of Florida, this is another state I have in the likely Republican column, this time with Marco Rubio running for a third term in 2022. He is easily going to win his party's renomination. However, on the Democratic side, we have Val Demings. She is at this point the presumptive nominee in this state. She has a very high chance at winning the nomination. However, currently in polling against Marco Rubio, Val Demings is falling short. She is currently down by 9% according to the RCP average. And I do think that Val Demings really does not have too much of a chance in this race. Marco Rubio is a very popular incumbent in a state that continues to lean more and more in favor of the Republican Party. In 2016, he defeated Patrick Murphy by a margin of 7%, and in 2020, he defeated former Governor Charlie Crist with 49% of the vote. So Marco Rubio, I think, is very safe in his position, and that is why I have Florida currently as a likely state. In the state of Alaska, I have the state as likely for Lisa Murkowski over Kelly Tshibaka. So there is probably going to be a three-way race in the state of Alaska, like we saw in 2016, but in 2020, we will have 2 Republicans and 1 independent or Democrat, essentially 1 candidate that's more on the left. So looking at the Republican Party, we have Lisa Murkowski and Kelly Tshibaka. These are the 2 main candidates for the GOP, with Lisa Murkowski, of course, being the incumbent senator. However, Kelly Tshibaka is the Trump-endorsed candidate that is supported by the Trump wing of the party. So if you were to look at the candidates in this race, Lisa Murkowski, Kelly Tshibaka, on the Democratic side, you really do not have anybody that is too important. In the Alaskan Independence Party, who sometimes does well in these races, you don't really have too many people that are too important either. For independents, Al Gross has withdrawn from the race. He ran for the Senate in 2020, and he did lose to Dan Sullivan by a solid margin. However, in 2022, he did plan on running. However, he has since dropped out. So I think this race obviously is going to be mainly between Lisa Murkowski as well as Kelly Tshibaka. And if you look at the polls that have been released, Kelly Tshibaka is surprisingly close to Lisa Murkowski in the polls that we have seen so far, with Kelly Tshibaka up 2 in the latest one. However, that was a funded campaign poll by the Tshibaka campaign. The other ones show Murkowski with a pretty solid lead. So I am currently going to give this race to Lisa Murkowski. And so now I'm going to move on and take a look at the states in which I expect a lean margin in them, with Republicans currently at 46 and Democrats at 45. So by lean, I mean margins of between 1 and 5%. And starting off, I'm going to start off with the Democratic states, starting off with the state of Arizona and Colorado. I'm going to do both these states together. So the states of Arizona and Colorado, I think that both of these states are going to be in the Democratic column. First off, the state of Arizona. In 2016, we saw John McCain get reelected. In 2020, Mark Kelly was able to win that special election, which is why he is up for an election again this year in 2022. And of course, he is going to win his renomination. On the Republican side, Mark Brnovich is the current frontrunner. However, Jim Lamont has very recently garnered a lot more support. I do think that Brnovich still has a very good chance at this race. The only two polls that he has not let in are two of the, most recent ones, or two of, the three most recent ones. However, Jim Lamont right now, I think, would be a better candidate than Mark Brnovich on a ballot against Mark Kelly. So that does make this race a little bit more difficult for the Democratic incumbent. However, in terms of polling between the two candidates, Mark Kelly has been very strong in terms of his polling. He has not been behind in any single poll that has been released for his race, and so that is why I currently have the state of Arizona categorized as being lean for Mark Kelly. In the state of Colorado, Michael Bennet is probably going to win his re-election. Not too much to talk about here. Michael Bennet is in a relatively safe Democratic state. His biggest challenger on the GOP side is not going to be Eli Bremer, who previously was thought to be the frontrunner. However, Ron Hanks currently is the frontrunner for this race. We're going to see what is going to happen at the convention. However, I believe Ron Hanks is very likely to be the nominee for 2022, and I think that's actually going to make it even easier for Michael Bennet to win his re-election. And finally, in the state of New Hampshire, I have this race as well being lean in favor of Maggie Hassan. Maggie Hassan, who was first elected in 2016 by a very small margin. This was the closest race of 2016 against Kelly Ayotte. And in 2022, we're going to see that on the Republican side, Chuck Morse is the current frontrunner, as well as Donald Boldeau. However, Chuck Morse has been doing better in the newest polls that have been released. This is a little bit of an older poll. This poll was actually administered before Chuck Morse even entered the race. So we do have to ignore that, but Chuck Morse is currently the frontrunner for this race. And if you look at any of the polls between Maggie Hassan and these Republicans, you will see that Maggie Hassan typically leads in all of them. And, her race, of course, got a lot easier after Sununu announced that he would not be running against Hassan. Chris Sununu is the very popular Republican governor of the state of New Hampshire. But if you look at the polls for the state of New Hampshire, you will see that this most recent poll out of the University of New Hampshire between Donald Boldeau, or Chuck Morse, and Maggie Hassan shows Morse up 2 points. This is the only time in which Maggie Hassan has not led in a poll against any Republican other than Chris Sununu in this race, and so that is definitely a bad sign for her campaign. But the state of New Hampshire does typically lean towards the Democratic Party, so I do believe that she still has a relatively strong chance. And so now the Republican lean states on this map, starting off with the state of Ohio. I don't think this is too surprising. In the state of Ohio, Rob Portman will be retiring after his big victory in 2016. In 2022, the Republicans are currently expected to nominate J.D. Vance. J.D. Vance has won the nomination of Donald Trump very recently. That's very recent news. So J.D. Vance has been nominated by the former president, and he is very likely at this point to win the nomination. If you look at the latest polls, as you can see here, ever since that nomination, J.D. Vance has performed very well in the polls in the state of Ohio. On the Democratic side, Tim Ryan is essentially the presumptive nominee at this point. He has a very high chance at winning the nomination for the Democratic Party, and I don't think anything else is going to happen other than that. But Tim Ryan is widely expected to lose this race. He may be the best candidate that Democrats can put up. However, he is still running in a state that favors the Republican Party quite a bit, and so that is why I have Ohio currently as being lean for the Republicans. I also have the state of Wisconsin with Ron Johnson running for re-election. If you look at the polls between Ron Johnson as well as Mandela Barnes, who is the current Democratic frontrunner, Ron Johnson and Barnes are currently even. However, this is a poll funded by the Barnes campaign, which is one that is obviously going to favor the Democrat here. So that is obviously not good news. Ron Johnson, I do think in Wisconsin, a more Republican-leaning state, I do think that he is going to have not that hard of a time winning his re-election. I think the polls have it a lot closer than what's actually going to happen. In the state of North Carolina, Sherry Beasley, the Democrat, will be taking on this is Ohio. In the state of North Carolina, we have a retiring Republican, but in 2022, Sherry Beasley for the Democrats will be taking on Ted Budd, who is currently the frontrunner and is getting more and more support from Republicans in the state of North Carolina. Pat McCrory's chances are getting lower and lower as the former governor who was defeated by Roy Cooper. So Ted Budd, I think, is probably going to win this nomination, going to go against Sherry Beasley, who is essentially the presumptive nominee at this point, defeating Jeff Jackson, who used to be ahead in this race. But I think that in the end, the Republican Party just has too strong of an edge. Sherry Beasley, she is not the best candidate. I think that she does not have too much name recognition, nor is she terribly popular, and she has basically been behind in every single poll against Ted Budd so far. So Republicans definitely have a very clear advantage in this race. And finally, in the state of Georgia, I have this classified as a lean state for the Republican Party as well. I do believe that this will be a flip. I do not think that Raphael Warnock is going to win his re-election. In 2016, Johnny Isakson was re-elected. In 2020, Raphael Warnock was elected to replace Kelly Loeffler, who was appointed by Brian Kemp to replace Johnny Isakson, who had retired due to health issues. So because this was, of course, a special election, Raphael Warnock will be up for another election this November, and in 2022, he will be going up against Herschel Walker, who is the current Republican frontrunner for the GOP primary, and he has a very high chance of winning this race. He has been polling in the 60s consistently and has the support of Donald Trump. So I really don't think that Republicans are going to nominate anyone else. And between him and Raphael Warnock, currently Herschel Walker is polling quite well, with him leading in a majority of polls released. So I do have this race going for the Republicans, and with the national environment just in general, I think it's going to be difficult for the Democratic Party here. But in the state of Nevada, I have this going for the Republicans. I do think that Catherine Cortez Masto is going to be defeated in her re-election in 2022. First elected in 2016 to replace Harry Reid, the Republicans are currently expected to nominate Adam Laxalt, who has a very long history in Nevada politics in terms of his family, and in terms of the polling between the two, between Laxalt and Cortez Masto, I think, the polling does clearly show that Adam Laxalt has an advantage in this race, and with, of course, the Republican leading environment, Democrats are going to struggle here as well. However, in the state of Pennsylvania, if Democrats were to nominate the current frontrunner John Fetterman, I do think Democrats have a very good chance in the state of Pennsylvania this November. This, I think, can be the only flip for the Democrats this November. On the Republican side, they're expected currently to nominate either David McCormick or Mehmet Oz. I think that Mehmet Oz would be probably the worst of the two candidates. However, Oz is currently actually leading in the polls now. His poll numbers have increased since he has recently joined this race. On the Democratic side, we have John Fetterman, who is also currently expected to win his race against Connor Lamb. I do think Fetterman, and both Fetterman as well as odds on the Republican side. I do think both of them are going to come out on top for their primaries, but John Fetterman is widely expected, I think, to win this race, at least according to the polls so far. Things may change, and of course, Pennsylvania is going to be a hotly contested race, but just looking at the recent numbers that we have seen, John Fetterman has been performing very well in the polls and is yet to be behind in any of the ones that have been released. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. This is my updated prediction for the 2022 Senate elections. The Republicans flipping the Senate with 51 seats, and the Democrats with 49, flipping Pennsylvania while losing the states of Nevada and Georgia. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to like it down below if you enjoyed it. Comment down below what you thought of my prediction. Subscribe to my channel if you have not, and I will see you guys in the next video.